podcast for accounting firm growth. I am your host, Angie Grissom. Today, I'm super excited to dive into the topic of the importance of buy-in of strategic planning. Today, we have Gary Thomson. Gary Thomson, who is a CPA, serves as a consultant to CPA firms in the critical arenas of leadership, succession, compensation, profitability, innovation, M&A, and strategic planning. Through mergers, Gary became part of Dixon Hughes Goodman, a top 20 CPA and consulting firm. Gary has served as a member of the senior leadership and management team, a regional managing partner of the Mid-Atlantic region, and a member of the firm's executive committee. In all of these capacities, Gary has had key roles in strategic planning, and we are so excited, Gary, to have you join us today.
And Angie, I'm excited as well to both partner with you and with AIM. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, Gary, let's jump right in. So why is buy-in at every level an important part of strategic planning?
You know, I think of the proverbial picture that you often see of a bridge to nowhere. It's this well-constructed bridge, and at the end of it, it just falls off and we don't know where it goes. And so when we think of strategy and strategic planning, you know, we can have all the best laid plans of mice and men. We can work hard. We can think about what's next. We can have a vision. But if we don't get buy-in to it, it's that proverbial, where are we going from here? So when I think the term buy-in and the benefits, I think about the clarity that it gives at all levels about the future. We know those things are aspirational, and oftentimes we're knocked off track from those things based on economic situations, competition, et cetera. But at least it gives us clarity about the future. And I think a word that I'm confident that you and I will use a lot today, which is the word alignment. How else can we really get all of our people throughout the organization aligned unless we have buy-in on that strategy? So I think the buy-in and the opportunity for us to think about that alignment throughout the organization is not only just a topic for a podcast, it's critical. It's critical for us to think about early on as we strategize around how we go about those things. We better think about how do we get buy-in. And you know, if we could define what the term buy-in is, I think leaders often struggle with that term, because is buy-in approval? Is buy-in everyone agreeing? Of course, you and I would say the answer to both of those is no, because we're not going to get everyone agreeing. We're not going to ask everyone's permission, but buy-in is much deeper and richer than that. Buy-in is our opportunity to cascade throughout the organization decisions that have been made, and how we spread enthusiasm throughout the organization for our strategy is all contingent on buy-in. So Angie, I think buy-in is just so critical that we could probably spend the next couple of days talking about it.
I agree. And Gary, you can have the strongest strategic plan in a firm, and if you have people that are not rowing in the same direction, you just don't accomplish what you could. So tell me, how do you think you can get buy-in, not only at the partner level, but across every level in the firm?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say, and this is not a commercial, but it's experiential. The first thing I would say is get others involved, particularly others that maybe aren't insiders in your organization. And Angie Grissom, or Gary Thomson, whoever it may be, and you go, okay, why is that not self-serving? Well, it's actually very practical. You know, an outsider has the opportunity to filter through preferences, to remove barriers that oftentimes leaders think about when they consider strategic planning. An outsider will often not look at history from a standpoint of what can and can't be done. Certainly take history into account when we think about the culture of an organization, but an outsider will press through those things where oftentimes internally we'll find ourselves inhibited. By the way, it's often easier for outsider, to hold the proverbial mirror up in front of someone's face and say, look in that mirror, leader, look in that mirror, firm, and let's look at what you're saying. Let's look at what you're demonstrating and allow them to think differently. I don't know about you, Angie, but when I would have someone come in from the outside and sit with me, whether it was in personal accountability and coaching or whether it was in strategic planning, they could say the same thing that I was saying, but somehow that it just sounded better coming from them. It sounded more contemplative or reflective. So I would say, get someone from the outside involved. It's an important opportunity for us. The next thing, just around how do we get buy-in across the firm, at the leader level, which is an area that you and I often engage, let's think about this, leader. How do we get people away? How do we get people's mindsets into this contemplative, let's think about strategy? What's the best format for that? And so leaders just planning it out. I will often get a call like this. Hey, we have a strategic planning meeting coming up next week. Can you help us with it? Well, of course, I want to help. I can do that. But the reality is it generally indicates we haven't given much forethought into not only what do we want to do, but how do we get leader buy-in? So just thinking about how do we get partners or owners, principals, shareholders, whatever the terms may be within your organization, how do we get them involved? How do we get them away from the hustle and bustle and focused on this? How do we get them ready? How do we prepare them, from pre-reads to surveys to interviews, whatever it may be? How do we get them engaged ahead of time? How do we make this their plan? I would say it takes a lot of planning and forethought on the part of leaders to think about how do we get them engaged. We often think of committees, task force, all those things are fantastic. But really thinking and planning through engagement, Angie, I think is critically important for us. So, a lot of planning can be involved in how we think about getting leaders involved.
I think that's a really great point, Gary. And we have to break through the preoccupation in everybody's mind. If you think about how stinking busy everybody is, they have all of these clients, all of these responsibilities, all of these deadlines, and then to put a strategic planning date on the calendar, a lot of times people will feel like, oh my gosh, it's one more thing I have to do. And they're really not, they don't have their head in the game. To your point, if they don't have the pre-work. So the interviews, the understanding of what does success look like from your perspective, from your perspective, from your perspective, where people are in the same room from the beginning, I think is so critically important in buy-in. The other thing, I'm a huge fan of Patrick Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And he talks about one of the dysfunctions, lack of accountability. With accountability and with buy-in, even though you might not agree with exactly what a decision that's been made as an owner, as a partner, don't you think it's important that people disagree in the room together and then buy in and agree outside so that they're rowing in the same direction?
I do, Angie. In fact, one of the early slides that I put in almost all of my meetings around strategy is a slide that I simply entitled "In the Room and Out of the Room." In that room, when the doors are closed, let's say respectfully everything that we need to say. In fact, that's often my job, is to pull out of people the things that maybe they're uncomfortable saying. But then we agree when the doors open and we walk out of that room, we're on the same page. We don't huddle in the corner. We don't huddle in others' office. We don't go to the people back in the office and talk about the things with which we didn't disagree. Now, is that meant to stifle differences of opinion? Of course not. But it says as leaders, we have this opportunity to get in the room, really hash it out, have tensions at times, which can be very healthy. But then whatever we agree to, again, whether we're on the winning side of the argument or on the other side of the argument, we at least know we've had our say. Like, I have the opportunity in leadership from starting my own firm to seeing it grow to ending up, as you stated earlier, in a top 20 firm. I lost a lot of votes. I was on the wrong side, if you will, of other votes. But the discipline and kind of the joy of leadership is when you have the ability to open the door and say, that's okay, we're all in at this point, it's important. We don't get that if there's not buy-in on the process. If we make strategic planning an edict, here it is, live with it, well, there's a really good chance that we're going to have the side room huddles, we're going to have the hallway huddles. There's a good chance our staff are going to hear us talking about those things with which we disagree. And then the effectiveness of that strategy really is undermined.
There's no faster way to blow up a strategic plan than meetings after the meetings.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Okay, well, we talked about the importance of buy-in at the owner partner group, which is absolutely critical. Taking the time, going through the process, getting the buy-in. But what about engaging your team? We are all so focused on developing future leaders. We want people to feel the purpose. We want people to feel engaged in the firm. They need to be at the table, right? In terms of where the firm is going. So, how do you engage your team and what are the impacts of doing so?
So at a broad level, Angie, I couldn't agree more. We have to engage the team. We obviously could get very tactical on this question, which we don't necessarily have time to go into details, but there's ways of engaging the team. As an example, if we have some near-term partners, shareholders, directors, principals, is there a possibility that we go ahead and include them in the process more directly with the other leaders? What's that look like? There's a risk to that, I realize, but if there are future leaders, what's their level of involvement? And of course, you and I hear things differently. Just me and you, Angie, being two consultants in the business, we're going to interpret words differently based on our experiences, based on our focus. Well, just imagine inside of a firm how staff at various levels could take areas of strategy and interpret them differently.
Yeah.
So we need to have the opportunity through committees or task force or just some type of exposure to here's what we're thinking. Here's what we've been thinking about and the ideas we've come up. Now help us understand how you interpret it. Look, I don't really get into the huge generational differences argument because I think the people who were my bosses back 35 years ago thought the way I did things was not the right way. So leaving that aside, there is the reality that someone at my point in the profession thinks and talks differently than someone that's 2 or 3 years into it. So engaging them in understanding, hearing, and for us listening. Now, I grew up as a minister's son, Angie. This is not one of those where we get them in the room and we say, this is the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
That's communication, but that's not engagement. It's the opportunity for us to say, this is what we're thinking. These are the words that we're choosing to use. How does that help us? A real contemporary conversation is around the idea of pulling clients. And, it's a strategy of a lot of firms. Well, take that concept to your staff and think about the myriad ways that they would think about it. One, that's great. We're going to get rid of some bad clients. Two, does that mean that we're going to have more time, or does that mean the clients going away is going to give us opportunity for growth? Three, what about me? If we get rid of clients and those were potentially going to be quote unquote my clients as a pathway to partner, what does that mean? And you and I could go on just on that single subject. So when we think about engagement of our people, it's this opportunity to make sure that the words that we use, the concepts that we have, the ideas that we've generated resonate throughout the organization. I also think, Angie, that in bringing them to the firm level, engaging others, it's kind of cool, if I can use that word, to theme it, to be able to have something that we can really grab onto, make it celebratory. There's ways that organizations do that, from in-person meetings to some type of momentum to memorialize the strategy work that's being done, something that people can remember, not just, in the throes of going through it, but in the future. So there's a lot of ways of engaging people, making them feel ownership around it, and importantly, making them feel enthusiastic about it.
I love the idea of celebrating that. And I love the idea of making it thematic. I think it's memorable and people get excited about it and they understand what's in it for them, which is really, what we need to be focused on. What are your goals? Where do you want to go? Where do you want the firm to go? I love your example about the client culling. That's such a relevant and timely example as well. Well, this has been such a great conversation, Gary. We are going to take a quick break so we can hear from the Association of Accounting Marketing, and we will be back with some final thoughts.
Whether part of a team or a department of one, individuals responsible for growth in the accounting profession join AIM to advance their careers and contribute at a high level to their firm's success. Members of AIM receive access to resources to help in their job and establish their reputation as a skilled professional, a network of peers who face the same industry challenges and can offer solutions, and a wide range of professional development and networking opportunities. Join AIM today. To learn more, visit the website at accountingmarketing.org. Again, that's accountingmarketing.org.
Welcome back, everyone. Gary, you have shared some great information today. So just a couple of more questions for you. How does the culture of a firm impact willingness to involve others or teams' willingness to participate?
Well, I think the culture obviously says a lot about an organization. And when we think about culture in today's dynamics, we often think about things that we do inside the office for our people, whether it's work-life balance, flexibility, free Diet Cokes in the break room, whatever it may be. All those things create culture. But I think in the context of strategy, rolling out strategy, getting feedback from our organization creates an acceptance of a little bit of vulnerability. It's one thing as a managing partner or CEO of a firm to walk into a group of staff people and say, here's our strategy. It's another thing to walk in saying, here's what we're thinking, we want your input. And I think from a culture standpoint, it sends this message that we're an organization that, yes, we have leaders who are willing to spend the time to think through these things and be deliberate in their conversations, but it's also the same group of leaders who desire to listen to you. So this whole culture of either vulnerability may not necessarily be the word that resonates with everyone, but it's this ability to say, despite what we think is the right answer, we're willing to listen to others. And by the way, you and I both know, when we think about generationally those that are, let's say, 35 and under, that's an important element for them to feel like they had a piece of it. So it creates that. The second is a word the second thing I can think of is a word that you and I have mentioned a lot already, and that's just the general term of engagement. You can't underestimate and you can't overstate the impact of including others in this planning. Ultimately, it's not just the process of planning it, but we want them involved in the execution of the strategic plan. So culturally, it says we're willing to take a chance in telling you and getting your feedback, but more importantly, we're willing to get you involved. And so that says a lot about an organization. And frankly, I think when we consider the opportunities to set a culture that says we're about listening, we're about getting feedback, and we're about engagement, I can't think of a better culture when we think about long-term strategy. Those become very, very flexible cultural dimensions, even as our visions may change and our strategic items may change over time.
What better way to create leaders and advisors than to let those people lead and serve as internal advisors in their firm on the way up? I mean, we should be the training ground for all of those people that we want to lead our firms in the future. And what a great opportunity to involve them in planning and execution and leading committees and leading initiatives. That is great hands-on experience. I love that.
It is. And look, for leaders, Angie, there's a risk to that, correct? There's a risk to they're not always going to be prepared for some of the tasks that we give them, but we support them, we stretch them. But I would say, much like the conversation we have around leveraging work and the impact of artificial intelligence, et cetera, we need to give our younger folks some opportunities to stretch themselves. I think they're talented to do that, whether it's in their work area, but to pivot to what we're talking about today, give them the opportunity to really talk about strategy of the future and to think through those things.
I love that. I love that. So finally, what advice would you give to those who want to create a powerful strategic plan in their firm and make it a priority?
One of the things that, at least since COVID, so let's talk about 3 years ago when we were having this conversation, the traditional concept of strategic planning followed some type of 3 to 5 year norm. There was some predictability to things, but in the last 3 years, we've seen technology, the way we adapt the workplace change quickly. So my advice is, let's think about strategic planning in a traditional context of thinking far in the future, but let's visit our strategy regularly. Let's not make this an effort that produces either literally or figuratively some glossy, here's our strategic plan that we give to prospects, that we give to future employees, and that we blow the dust off up every once in a while and talk about. I think that the whole process of strategic planning now is much more iterative. We have to think about it regularly. We have to revisit it. Whatever that cadence could look like, I think is up to your firm. But, annual partner meeting, annual partner retreat, annual meeting of the firm, annual updates that you may give, state of the firm, whatever venues are out there, let's revisit it. Let's keep it top of mind all the time. And let's be willing to say that no longer fits us. Something's changed about our market, and we don't have to wait for 5 years to change it. Let's change it now. So making strategic planning and the whole process of thinking strategy something that we do regularly, as opposed to an event every 3 to 5 years.
It's such great advice, Gary. I really appreciate you being on today with your unique background and having, sat in the seats of those that are working to execute planning within a firm of various sizes. Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your thoughts and your wonderful experience. It's been a really, I think, powerful interview. So, Gary, how can our audience best get in touch with you or find out more about you?
Sure, Angie, thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to be on with you. The opportunity that I've had to partner with Angie and some other things is fantastic. And I look forward to that in the future as well. My website's www.thomsonconsulting.com. For those who may be new to me, Thomson doesn't have a P in it. I have a unique spelling of my name. So thomsonconsulting.com. I enjoy the opportunity to be involved in strategy work and helping leaders think through strategic planning. So you're always welcome to connect with me. Angie and I will partner on some of these things as well. So they can contact me through the website. And you'll also see me on Angie's website as well as one of the individuals that's involved with her on a consulting basis. So either place they can find me, Angie.
Great. Thank you, Gary, so much. Well, this is it for another episode of Amplify, the podcast for accounting firm growth. Thank you so much for listening in. Let us know what you think about the episode on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd really appreciate it. If you want to find out more about Amplify and all of our episodes, head over to accountingmarketing.org and you'll find the podcast under publications. If you'd like to find out more about me and Rainmaker, visit us at therainmakercompanies.com or email me at Angie@therainmakercompanies.com. See you next time.